My child, listen to my voice. I know exactly how heavy your heart is in this very moment. I see the invisible weight you carry on your shoulders, a crushing, suffocating burden you have dragged through the dark valleys of uncertainty for far too long. You are exhausted, not merely the kind of tired that a single night of sleep or a brief weekend of rest can cure, but a deep, profound, bone-aching weariness that seeps into the very marrow of your spirit. You have prayed until your throat is raw, and you have wept into your pillow, until your eyes burn with the bitter salt of unanswered questions. You have stared blankly at the ceiling in the dead quiet hours of the night, listening to the heavy silence of the room, wondering in the deepest corners of your mind if I have completely forgotten you. You have felt the paralyzing grip of burnout, the terrifying, breathless spiral of financial panic, and the hollow, ringing echo of severe emotional fatigue. You look around at the landscape of your life, and you see walls relentlessly closing in immovable circumstances that refuse to budge a single inch, and heavy doors that seem permanently bolted shut. I know you have reached the absolute undeniable end of your human strength. You are running on empty, moving through the motions of your daily life, on mere fumes of survival, wearing a mask of bravery, while your soul is secretly collapsing underneath. You have rehearsed the worst-case scenarios so many times in your mind that they have begun to feel more real, more tangible than my ancient promises. You are ready to lay down your armor. You are ready to surrender to the creeping despair, genuinely believing that this long, barren, painful season is simply how your story is destined to end. But my beloved child, I am speaking to you right now to tell you that your immense exhaustion is not a sign of your defeat. It is not the period at the end of your sentence. It is the absolute definitive signal that you are standing on the very precipice of a miraculous rescue. Human strength must completely deplete before divine power can perfectly and undeniably manifest. Your total inability to fix the situation, your complete lack of earthly resources, is the exact pristine canvas I require to paint my greatest, most sudden victory. Hear me clearly, and let these words penetrate the fog of your weariness. I am interrupting your despair. Right now, in this precise fleeting second, an alarm clock is ringing loudly in the spiritual realm. It is a sound of absolute supreme authority, reverberating through the heavens and echoing down into the very foundation of your current life. The long, agonizing, frustrating season of silence you have endured is abruptly, violently concluding. I am stepping directly into your reality. I am crossing the boundary between the unseen spiritual world and your visible physical environment. And I am bringing the full, unstoppable weight of my sovereignty with me. The profound miracle you have been desperately begging for is no longer just a distant possibility hovering in some vague, unreachable future. It has already been triggered in the highest courts of heaven. The gavel has fallen. The command has left my lips. And now, the final 10-minute countdown to its physical manifestation in your everyday life has officially begun. Do not let your weary, battered mind convince you that things will always be exactly as they have been. The darkness that surrounds you right now is not the permanent darkness of a tomb. It is the temporary, necessary darkness of a womb. You are about to be birthed into a completely new, breathtaking reality. I am omnipresent, meaning I am already standing securely in the tomorrow you are so desperately afraid of. And I assure you, it is completely flooded with my brilliant restoring light. This is the very nature of my deliverance. It does not always announce itself with a slow, gradual, predictable sunrise. Often it breaks into your pitch-black night like a sudden, blinding strike of lightning. Think of my faithful servant Peter. I want you to visualize the cold, damp, unforgiving stone of his prison cell. He was locked away in the deepest, darkest dungeon, confined by heavy, rusted iron chains that bound his wrists and his ankles with merciless grip. Outside his cell, hardened soldiers stood guard, heavily armed and under strict, lethal orders. Beyond those guards, a massive, impenetrable iron gate secured the perimeter of the prison. In the natural, physical, logical world, Peter's situation was entirely hopeless. His public execution was scheduled for the very next morning. Every earthly option had been exhausted. Every avenue of escape was definitively sealed. He was so completely out of human strength, so entirely devoid of solutions, that he simply gave up his worry and fell fast asleep on the hard, freezing stone floor. He had surrendered his anxiety and completely let go of his futile human striving. And in that precise moment of total, profound helplessness, the atmosphere of the prison cell violently and spectacularly shifted. There was no slow unlocking of doors, no quiet diplomatic negotiation with the armed guards. Suddenly, an angel of my presence materialized out of thin air, in the pitch blackness flooding the damp, foul dungeon with a blinding, terrifyingly beautiful celestial light. The angel did not gently whisper to coax him awake. He struck Peter on the side, jolting him instantly from his heavy death row slumber. It was a wholly aggressive interruption. The command was simple and urgent. Get up quickly. And in that fraction of a second, without a single key being turned, without a single human finger lifting to help, the heavy, impossible iron chains simply fell off Peter's wrists. They dropped to the stone floor, entirely powerless against the sudden, overwhelming, concentrated force of my deliverance. The massive iron gate leading to the city opened completely on its own. What was utterly impossible for Peter to achieve in a lifetime of struggling was accomplished by my hand in a matter of fleeting seconds. My child, you are sitting in your own version of that dark prison cell right now. Your chains may not be made of cold forged iron, but they are just as heavy, and they feel just as utterly impossible to break. Perhaps your chains are forged from the crushing, suffocating anxiety of financial ruin, the terrifying stack of bills that you cannot possibly pay, and the bank accounts that have run completely painfully dry. Perhaps you are bound by a devastating medical report that offers absolutely no hope, leaving you feeling trapped and betrayed by your own physical body. Or maybe your prison is constructed from the severe emotional fatigue of broken relationships, toxic family conflicts that seem permanently shattered, and a profound aching, invisible loneliness that isolates you from the rest of the world. You have looked at the armed guards of your circumstances, the mounting debt, the relentless disease, the crippling depression, the stinging rejection, and you have calculated with your earthly logic that there is absolutely no way out. You have felt trapped, suffocated by the narrowing walls of your own life. But I need you to recognize the profound, beautiful truth hidden within your entrapment. Having zero earthly options means you are in the absolutely perfect position for a heavenly rescue. When your bank account is totally empty, when your human connections have failed you, when your own sharp intellect cannot formulate a single viable plan, that is exactly when I step into the cell. You do not need to figure out how your chains will fall. You do not need to understand the complex mechanics of how the iron gate will open. You only need to know that the angel of your deliverance has already been dispatched. The heavy, oppressive atmosphere in your home, in your racing mind, and in your daily circumstances is shifting right now. The despair that is wrapped so tightly around your throat is actively losing its suffocating grip. I am striking you awake from the deep slumber of your defeat. I am telling you to stand up, to rise to your feet, even while you still feel the lingering phantom weight of the chains, because those chains are already losing their structural integrity. They are about to hit the floor with a deafening crash. The impossible deadline, the unpayable debt, the unfixable heartbreak. I am overriding absolutely all of it. Your 10-minute countdown is ticking, and with every passing second, the spiritual atmosphere is rearranging itself to accommodate the massive blessing I am pouring out. The alarm clock of the Spirit is ringing loudly, dismantling the heavy shadows that have tried to convince you that your story ends in ruin. You are not a forgotten casualty of a cold, indifferent universe. You are my beloved, deeply cherished, fiercely protected, and intentionally chosen. The sudden shift from darkness to blinding light is already in motion. The chains are slipping from your wrists. The heavy iron gates of your long captivity are beginning to swing open on their own accord. Take a deep, trembling breath and let the reality of this sudden rescue wash over your weary soul. The wait is terminating. The clock is ticking down. Now I need you to open your spiritual eyes to look beyond the immediate pain and the physical debris of your current struggle. Prepare your heart, my child, and look closely through the veil, because I am about to show you the magnificent hidden architecture of exactly what I have been building behind the scenes during all those long, agonizing years when you mistakenly believed I was entirely silent. You looked at the empty spaces in your life and assumed I had abandoned you. You measured my love by the doors that refused to open, by the relationships that fractured without warning, by the opportunities that were abruptly handed to someone else while you stood empty-handed in the cold. I watched you cry on the edge of your bed, wrestling with the agonizing quiet thought that you were somehow fundamentally flawed. You believed you had missed your only chance, or worse, that I was actively withholding my goodness because of some mistake you made in your past. My child, let me gently lift your chin right now. Look into my eyes and hear the absolute truth of heaven. My silence was never my absence. While you were staring at the barren surface of your circumstances, weeping over the dirt where you thought your deepest dreams had died, I was working furiously deep within the soil of your life. I need you to experience a profound shift in your perspective. Every time you faced a rejection that left you gasping for air, you cataloged it as a personal failure. When that specific career path abruptly ended, leaving you scrambling to pay your bills and questioning your purpose, you felt betrayed. When that financial door slammed shut in your face, when that person you loved so deeply walked away and left you shattered into a million jagged pieces, you felt completely, utterly discarded. You cried out asking me why I did not intervene to stop the bleeding. You begged me to reverse the loss. But what you could not possibly see from your limited earthly vantage point was the terrifying cliff edge that lay just beyond those doors. If I had answered your prayers exactly when and how you demanded, you would have stepped into a future that was fundamentally too small to hold your true destiny. Or worse, you would have walked into a situation that would have ultimately destroyed you. I was shielding you from betrayals you could not foresee. I was pulling you away from environments that would have slowly drained your spirit and compromised the beautiful anointing I placed upon you. I was not ignoring your cries. I was intercepting disasters you will never even know about. I was actively answering a much greater, much more magnificent prayer. The prayer your soul was crying out, even though your mind did not yet possess the vocabulary to articulate it. I was orchestrating a massive, intricate web of divine providence, shifting people, moving resources, and aligning geography so perfectly that when your true moment finally arrived, it would be absolutely unshakable. Think of a tiny seed buried beneath the dark, heavy earth. To the seed, the darkness feels exactly like a grave. In that cold isolation, the seed feels stripped of all comfort. It feels as though the vibrant life it was promised is nothing more than a cruel illusion. The pressure of the packing soil feels crushing, suffocating, and entirely devoid of hope. But it is only within that absolute darkness, under that immense, unbearable pressure, that the hard outer shell finally cracks open, allowing the delicate roots of life to take hold. You were not buried, my beloved. You were planted. I want you to remember Joseph languishing in the cold, damp stone of a forgotten Egyptian dungeon. He had been stripped of his colorful coat, sold into slavery, by his own flesh and blood, falsely accused by a wicked system, and thrown into a pitch-black pit. Year after agonizing year, the heavy silence echoed around him. When he finally accurately interpreted the dream of Pharaoh's cupbearer, he begged to be remembered. He begged for a simple human intervention to end his misery. But the cupbearer walked out of the prison, stepped back into the warm sunlight of his own freedom, and completely forgot the young man left rotting in the dark. Joseph spent 2 more excruciating years in that cell. I know you have felt exactly like that. You have felt forgotten by the people who promised to advocate for you. You have felt overlooked by the systems you thought would recognize your talent. You have felt completely abandoned in the dark while you watched others walk out into the bright sunlight of their own success, easily obtaining the very things you have been desperately praying for. You wondered through hot, silent tears of frustration why I allowed your cupbearers to forget your name, why your faithful service seemed to go entirely unrewarded. But look closely at the magnificent hidden architecture of my providence. If the cupbearer had remembered Joseph the very next morning, what would have happened? Joseph would have been released simply as a pardoned slave. He would have walked back out into the desert, returning to a small, vulnerable life of shepherding. He would have been entirely defenseless against the massive, devastating famine that was about to sweep across the known world, destroying everything in its path. My delay was never a punishment. It was a profound, masterful, fiercely loving protection. I kept him hidden safely in the dark, just a little bit longer, because I was waiting for Pharaoh to have a dream. I was waiting for the exact, unrepeatable fraction of a second where Joseph would not just be freed from a dungeon, but instantly elevated to the highest throne in the palace, positioned with absolute authority to save nations and rescue his entire bloodline from starvation. That same sovereign hand has been resting heavily and protectively over your life, carefully orchestrating the precise timing of your release. You have grieved bitterly over the cupbearers in your own story. You have wept over the employers who overlooked your resume, the partners who broke their promises and fractured your trust, the financial institutions that stamped your applications with a firm denial. You have spent countless agonizing nights analyzing your perceived inadequacies, believing their rejection was the final devastating verdict on your worth as a human being. But I need you to see the magnificent truth that is dawning upon you right now. The doubt that has clouded your vision is evaporating in the warmth of this revelation. I deliberately closed those doors because I am preparing you for the palace. I hid you in the protective shadows to prevent you from settling for a counterfeit destiny that would have left you starving. The delays were not my rejection. They were my supreme mercy. The brutal setbacks were the very instruments of my grace. This agonizing waiting period was the holy furnace where I was forging your spiritual resilience, actively expanding your internal capacity, so that you will not crumble under the immense, beautiful weight of the blessing that is about to overtake you. Let this realization wash completely over you. Feel the heavy, bitter scales of doubt begin to fall from your eyes. The false narrative of your unworthiness is shattering against the brilliant, undeniable reality of my providence. You were never behind schedule. You have not wasted your life. Every confusing detour, every tear-stained night, every painful rejection was a precise, divine calculation designed to bring you to this exact intersection of time and space. I have been building the foundation of your miracle in the dark, laying structural groundwork so vast and incredibly strong that no storm of this world will ever tear it down. I see the shift happening within your spirit now. You are beginning to understand that my silence was the sound of me working. But I also know that the dark was incredibly painful. I know the long days turned into agonizing months, and the months bled into exhausting years. I know the tears you wept into the soil were real and heavy. I do not minimize the sheer agony of the pit you have endured. I sat with you in every single moment of your heartbreak, collecting every desperate tear, feeling the sharp, jagged edges of your confusion, as if they were my own. I know exactly how badly it hurt to trust me when you could not trace my hand, to force yourself to keep walking forward when the path was completely obscured by terrifying shadows. You have fought a long, grueling battle against your own despair, and you have survived. The season of your hiddenness has accomplished its perfect holy work. The roots have grown deep enough. The foundation has been flawlessly poured. The magnificent architecture of your miracle is now entirely complete. The heavy lifting of the waiting season is over, and it is time for the profound ache in your bones to be met with a supernatural healing balm, bringing you into a state of absolute encompassing rest before the dawn breaks. Let your shoulders drop. Feel the rigid defensive posture you have maintained for so many years begin to soften. You have lived in a state of perpetual bracing, your jaw clenched, your hands curled into tight fists, constantly anticipating the next blow, the next failure, the next emergency. You have convinced yourself that if you relax your guard for even a fraction of a second, everything you love will instantly collapse. You have been carrying the massive crushing weight of your own survival, dragging it like a boulder strapped to your chest while trying to climb a mountain. But my child, that heavy load was never meant for your fragile frame. It is entirely too much for you, and it has worn you down to a mere shadow of the vibrant, joyful soul I created you to be. I am stepping directly into your path right now, reaching out, my hands to gently pry your fingers open. It is time for the great transfer of weight. You do not have to hold the universe together anymore. I am here to take it from you entirely. I have watched you closely in those agonizing quiet hours of the night. I have seen you lying awake while the rest of the world sleeps peacefully, your mind racing in terrifying endless circles. You calculate and recalculate your dwindling finances, staring at the glaring numbers until they blur desperately, trying to force mathematical equations to yield a solution that simply is not there. You agonize over unfixable family problems, pouring your precious emotional energy into relationships that refuse to heal, believing that if you just try a little harder, speak a little softer, or sacrifice a little more, you can single-handedly mend the deep fractures in your home. You have allowed severe anxiety to dictate the rhythm of your heartbeat, convinced that your relentless worrying is somehow a protective shield against disaster. You have operated under the exhausting illusion that your deliverance depends entirely upon your own intellect, your own endurance, and your own endless striving. You have believed that the moment you stop paddling, you will inevitably drown in the turbulent, violent waters of your circumstances. But human striving, no matter how noble or fierce, can never manufacture what only heavenly grace can freely bestow. Let me speak directly to the hollow feeling in your chest, the physical nausea that accompanies the ringing of the telephone or the arrival of the mail. You have been living in a state of high alert, flooded with the adrenaline of constant crisis management. This relentless pressure has drained your joy, stolen your appetite, and left you feeling like an empty vessel. You are tired of being the strong one. You are tired of being the reliable pillar everyone else leans upon, while your own foundation is quietly crumbling into dust. You are so profoundly weary of the endless fighting, the constant need to prove your worth, to justify your existence, and to scrape together enough resources just to make it to the next week. Hear my voice clearly. The fight is over. You do not have to fight for this incoming miracle. You do not have to earn it, orchestrate it, or figure out its complex logistics. You only need to be still. I am offering you my yoke of grace. It is perfectly fitted to you, and its burden is incredibly light. I am not asking you to muster up one last burst of heroic strength or to push through the pain one more time. I am asking you to collapse safely into my arms. I want you to remember my prophet Elijah, a man who knew the exact paralyzing texture of the burnout you are experiencing right now. He had just witnessed an extraordinary monumental victory on Mount Carmel, a fiery, undeniable display of my supreme power. Yet immediately following that massive triumph, a single threat from Queen Jezebel sent him fleeing into the barren, unforgiving wilderness. He ran for his life, driven by pure terror and absolute physical depletion. He did not stop until he collapsed under the meager shade of a solitary broom tree in the middle of the scorching desert. He was not just tired. His spirit was entirely broken. He had absolutely nothing left to give. He prayed that he might die, crying out that he was no better than his ancestors, completely overwhelmed by the sheer crushing futility of his circumstances. He was consumed by his own exhaustion, believing his profound fatigue was the final verdict on his calling. Notice exactly what I did in that moment of his absolute despair. I did not send a thundering voice from the heavens to rebuke him for his lack of faith. I did not deliver a stern, demanding sermon, telling him to stand up, be strong, and act like a fearless warrior. I did not hand him a new strategic battle plan, or demand that he immediately return to the dangerous front lines. I knew his frame. I remembered that he was made of dust. Instead of a lecture, I sent an angel, and the angel did not come with a sword, but with divine sustenance. As Elijah slept the heavy, unresponsive sleep of the deeply depressed and utterly burned out, the angel gently touched him, waking him to the rich smell of fresh bread, baking on hot coals, and a cool, refreshing jar of pure water resting near his head. The command was not to fight. The command was simply to eat and drink. I provided supernatural restoration for his shattered body and his weary soul. I fed him, and then I let him go back to sleep, allowing the deep, restorative peace of heaven to mend the frayed edges of his shattered nervous system. I nourished him in the barren wilderness, sustaining him entirely by my grace, when his own human strength had completely evaporated. My beloved child, I am baking bread on the hot coals for you right now. I am setting a cool, refreshing jar of living water right beside your weary head. You have been running through the dry, scorching desert of your own trials for so long, fleeing from the constant threats of your circumstances, and you have finally collapsed under your own broom tree. I am not here to demand more of you. I am not here to criticize your lack of progress or to point out where your faith wavered in the terrifying dark. I am here to touch you gently and offer you profound supernatural rest. Breathe in the aroma of my provision. Drink deeply from the well of my endless grace. Feel the thick, heavy burden of survival lifting entirely off your chest, rapidly replaced by a warm, encompassing relief. Notice how your breathing is slowing down, how the frantic, panicked rhythm of your heart is settling into a steady, peaceful beat. I am taking the unpayable bills out of your trembling hands. I am removing the impossible family conflicts from your bruised shoulders. I am lifting the heavy burden of your health anxieties, your career setbacks, and your paralyzing fear of the future. You do not have to hold them anymore. Let them fall. Feel the incredible, overwhelming lightness of a soul that has finally stopped trying to control the wind and the waves. The miracle that is currently unfolding around you does not require your supervision. It does not need your management or your constant worried oversight. It is moving purely on the momentum of my spoken word. Your only assignment in this holy, sacred moment is to be entirely still and permit me to love you, to sustain you, and to restore the years that the swarming locusts have eaten. Allow the deep, muscular tension of the last decade to melt away entirely. Let the exhaustion drain completely out through your fingertips, washing down into the earth, leaving you feeling wonderfully light, perfectly safe, and entirely protected. You are wrapped tightly in a cocoon of divine peace, shielded from the noise, the demands and the suffocating pressures of the outside world. Sink deeply into this profound relief, knowing with absolute certainty that I have taken over the battle. The striving has ceased. The warfare is finished. As you rest securely in my unshakable presence, basking in the quiet warmth of this newfound safety, I need you to look down at your open, relaxed hands. They are finally free from the heavy burdens of survival, but to hold the magnificent, unprecedented blessing that is about to arrive, they must be completely empty. You must drop the jagged stones you have carried for so long, releasing the bitter grievances and the toxic attachments to past disappointments, so that your heart is utterly clean and ready to receive the new. Look deeply into the palms of those resting hands. My child, see the faint indentations left behind by the heavy burdens of survival you have finally laid down. You have let go of the striving, but as you sit here in the quiet warmth of my presence, I want you to notice something else. Your fingers are still slightly curled. You are still instinctively clutching invisible fragments of your past. I see the jagged little stones of regret you have hidden deep within your pockets. The sharp pieces of shattered history you turn over and over in your mind when the room grows quiet. You have held on to these bitter grievances for so long that they have begun to feel like a fundamental part of your own identity. You wear your past disappointments like a heavy, familiar coat, believing that if you carry the memory of your failures, you will somehow protect yourself from making the exact same mistakes again. But I am telling you that this old, heavy coat is suffocating the vibrant life right out of you. The magnificent, unprecedented miracle arriving in these final minutes requires completely clean soil to take root. You cannot cultivate the brilliant, sprawling garden of your future in a heart that is choked by the thorny, overgrown weeds of yesterday's grief. Spiritual decluttering is not a gentle suggestion. It is an absolute, non-negotiable necessity for the holy season you are stepping into right now. I am pouring out a completely new, vibrant, and fiercely alive vintage of grace. And as my word declares, you cannot pour new wine into old, rigid wineskins. If you insist on forcing this massive, expansive blessing into the brittle, unforgiving boundaries of your past pain, the skins will violently burst, and the blessing will spill uselessly onto the ground. You must actively release your toxic attachments to the seasons that simply did not bloom the way you expected. I know exactly how deeply the betrayal of that failed marriage still stings. I watched as the vows were broken, and I felt the precise moment your trust shattered into pieces. I see how you harbor that lingering bitterness, secretly believing that your anger is the only shield you have left to guard your fragile heart. I know the heavy, suffocating guilt you carry over that career misstep, the financial loss, or the parenting mistake that wakes you with a cold sweat in the middle of the night. You replay the reel of your perceived failures over and over, trapped in a paralyzing fear that history is destined to repeat itself. You are holding yourself hostage in a prison of your own regret, demanding an earthly apology that may never come, or punishing yourself for a debt I have already entirely paid. I want you to remember, my children the Israelites, as they wandered through the vast sweeping sands of the wilderness, I had just performed unimaginable, staggering wonders for them. I had broken the iron fist of their oppressors, parted the very waters of the Red Sea to secure their escape, and led them out of brutal generational slavery with a mighty hand. They were entirely free. Yet as they walked through the desert toward a land flowing with milk and honey, their minds remained violently chained to their past. When the journey grew uncomfortable and the unfamiliarity of their freedom felt overwhelming, they began to weep. They looked back toward the very place that had enslaved them, and they romanticized their chains. They cried out in bitter complaint, longing for the leeks, the onions, and the garlic of Egypt. In their backward-looking grief, they completely ignored the miraculous supernatural manna I was gently placing on the ground for them every single morning. They were so deeply attached to the familiar taste of their captivity that they nearly missed the breathtaking reality of the promised land I had prepared for them. My beloved, you are weeping for your own Egypt. You are mourning a past that was slowly, inevitably crushing your spirit. You romanticize the relationships that continually broke you, simply because they are familiar. You grieve over the closed door of a job or an opportunity that was secretly draining your soul, wishing you could go back to the predictable pain, rather than trusting me in the unfamiliar terrain of your absolute freedom. It is time to stop turning your head, to look over your shoulder. You cannot walk confidently into the promised land of this 10-minute miracle while your heart is still desperately lingering in the brickyards of your past. You must drop the stones. Right now, in the quiet safety of this moment, I am asking you to practice the profound, liberating art of spiritual release. I am asking you to forgive. I know the very word feels like a physical mountain to climb, but forgiveness is not about validating the harm that was done to you. It is about unlocking your own cage. It is about refusing to let the person who hurt you in the past continue to dictate the atmosphere of your future. Let go of the desperate, aching need to be vindicated by the people who misunderstood you. I am your supreme vindicator. I will restore what was stolen, but you must take your hands off the ledger. You must forgive the betrayer, the friend who walked away, the system that failed you, and the parent who could not love you the way you needed to be loved. And even more importantly, my child, you must forgive yourself. You have been your own harshest, most relentless judge. You have held yourself in contempt for the naive decisions you made when you were simply doing the best you could with the light you had. You look back at the younger version of yourself and you cringe, piling on heavy stones of shame and self-condemnation. I am commanding you to lay those specific stones down. I do not condemn you. My blood has washed that slate entirely beautifully clean. Why do you insist on holding on to a record of wrongs that the Creator of the universe has already permanently erased? Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a deep, fast-flowing river. In your hands are the heavy, dark, jagged rocks of every regret, every bitter memory, and every toxic attachment you have dragged with you up to this very second. Feel their rough edges against your skin. Acknowledge how heavy they have been, how much they have slowed your progress, and how they have kept your hands completely occupied, leaving absolutely no room for anything else. Now take a deep cleansing breath and intentionally open your fingers. Watch as those stones tumble from your grip. Listen to the quiet splash as they hit the water and sink immediately to the bottom, instantly swept away by the powerful rushing current of my profound grace. They are gone. They are buried in the depths of the sea, and they will never, ever be allowed to surface again. Feel the miraculous, sweeping emotional release taking place inside your chest. The chronic underlying ache of regret is dissolving, melting away, like frost under a blazing morning sun. The paralyzing fear of your past repeating itself is evaporating completely, replaced by a thrilling, buoyant sense of liberation. You are experiencing the pure, unadulterated freedom of a clean slate. The soil of your heart is now deeply tilled, cleared of all the choking debris, and perfectly richly prepared. You have successfully decluttered your spirit, making a vast, wide-open space for the staggering goodness I'm bringing. Look down at your hands once more. They are entirely empty. They are completely, beautifully clean. There is no tension in your fingers, no lingering dust from the past, no heavy stones weighing down your arms. You are sitting in the light, unburdened, unchained, and fiercely alive. And because your hands are finally empty, because your mind is no longer distracted by the loud, demanding ghosts of yesterday, you are now perfectly positioned to sense the incredible, invisible reality that is pressing in around you. Keep your empty hands open, my child, and pay very close attention to the air in the room. You are about to learn how to recognize the subtle holy vibrations, the undeniable physical proof that the very atmosphere of your life is actively shifting as heaven forcefully intersects with your earth. Keep your empty hands open, my child, and pay very close attention to the air in the room. You are about to learn how to recognize the subtle holy vibrations, the undeniable physical proof that the very atmosphere of your life is actively shifting as heaven forcefully intersects with your earth. For the longest time, you have lived in a state of profound emotional numbness. The prolonged season of disappointment you just survived acted like a heavy, suffocating anesthetic, dulling your senses and freezing your capacity to hope. You learned to expect nothing because expecting nothing felt like the only reliable way to protect yourself from the agonizing sting of yet another letdown. Your days became a mechanical routine of waking, surviving, and sleeping entirely devoid of color or expectation. The spiritual climate around you felt like a stagnant, windowless room where the air was entirely dead and unmoving. But I want you to sit very still in this exact moment and feel the subtle change. There is a distinct, sudden drop in the spiritual barometric pressure. The dead air is stirring. A faint, almost imperceptible current is brushing against your spirit, carrying with it a strange, unfamiliar energy. It is the quiet, electric hum of my glory beginning to touch the very edges of your current reality. Massive, unprecedented breakthroughs do not materialize out of a void. They always cast a long, majestic shadow before they arrive. Long before your natural eyes can perceive the structural changes in your finances, your career, or your fractured relationships, the spiritual environment must be dramatically altered. This is the sacred space where true faith breathes and operates. Faith is not a blind, desperate wish. It is the concrete, undeniable evidence of things not yet seen. It is the deeply cultivated ability to stand under a perfectly clear, mercilessly blue sky and inhale the distinct, heavy scent of rain. Right now, the invisible realm surrounding you is pregnant with divine activity. The thick, heavy veil separating my heavenly providence from your earthly circumstances is growing exceptionally thin, practically translucent. The deep numbness that has shielded your heart for years is rapidly dissolving, and in its place, a sharp, thrilling anticipation is waking up within your chest. I want to take you back to a desolate peak in Israel, to a time when the earth was violently parched by 3.5 years of absolute drought. The ground was baked into a hard, unforgiving crust, splitting open in deep, jagged cracks that looked like desperate mouths gasping for moisture. The streams had turned to dust, the crops had withered to ash, and the entire nation was suffocating under the heavy, oppressive silence of a brass sky. In the midst of this devastating dryness, my prophet Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bowed low to the earth, and told his servant to go look toward the sea. The servant climbed to the vantage point, stared out at the vast, empty horizon, and saw absolutely nothing. The sky was aggressively clear. The air was brutally dry. He returned to Elijah with the heavy, discouraging report of emptiness. 6 times the servant was told to return to the ridge. 6 times he walked the same path, squinting into the blinding sun, desperate for any indication that the agonizing drought was breaking. 6 times he faced the crushing, familiar disappointment of a sky that refused to yield. I know you understand the profound exhaustion of that servant's walk. I know how many times you have looked out at the horizon of your own life, desperately searching for a tiny glimpse of rescue, only to be met with the agonizing, unchanging landscape of your struggles. You have checked your bank accounts, looked into the eyes of your loved ones, and evaluated your career prospects, returning to your knees, time and time again, with the same heartbreaking report. There is nothing there. The dryness seems permanent. The isolation feels entirely absolute. You have been tempted so many times to simply stop climbing the ridge, convinced that looking for rescue only deepens the pain of your reality. But I am the God of the seventh glance. When Elijah's servant walked up to that ridge for the seventh time, something in the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. He looked out over the vast expanse of the Mediterranean Sea, and there, rising quietly from the horizon, was a cloud as small as a man's hand. It was not a sprawling, ominous storm front. It was not a terrifying display of thunder and lightning. It was just a tiny, fragile wisp of vapor easily missed by the untrained eye, completely insignificant against the sprawling backdrop of the massive empty sky. Yet that miniature cloud was all the proof heaven required. It was the absolute undeniable shadow of the incoming flood. Elijah did not wait for the sky to turn black before he declared that the drought was over. He heard the roar of a heavy shower in the silence of that single tiny cloud. My beloved, you have been navigating a brutal, exhausting spiritual drought. There have been long, agonizing months where praying felt like throwing words against a concrete ceiling, where your faith felt brittle and dry, and where deep discouragement became your constant unwanted companion. But I am telling you to look out at the horizon of your life right now. I am already placing clouds as small as a man's hand directly into your daily routine. You must open your spiritual eyes and recognize them for what they truly are. They are not coincidences. They are the undeniable precursors to your flood. Notice the sudden, entirely unexplainable wave of deep peace that washed over you yesterday while you were doing something as mundane as washing the dishes or driving to work. You were bracing for the familiar spike of anxiety, but instead, your mind was enveloped in a quiet, profound stillness that you did not manufacture. That was a cloud as small as a man's hand. Pay attention to that random, completely unexpected word of encouragement from a stranger, or that tiny, seemingly insignificant financial blessing that arrived in the mail just when you were overwhelmed by fear. Notice the brief, fleeting moment of genuine connection with that difficult family member, a conversation that for the first time in years did not end in conflict, but concluded with a strange, gentle neutrality. Think about the moment you woke up this morning, and before the heavy weight of your responsibilities could pin you to the mattress, you felt a sudden, spontaneous spark of hope. These are not random, disconnected moments of luck in an otherwise dark universe. They are the subtle, holy vibrations of my kingdom colliding with your current reality. They are the precise tactical shifts in your environment that prove the long season of barrenness is officially breaking. Do not despise the day of small beginnings. Do not look at that momentary peace or that tiny financial reprieve and dismiss it, because it does not instantly solve the entirety of your massive problems. The human mind demands to see the full raging hurricane before it will believe that the drought is over. But I am asking you to operate in a much higher, much more powerful frequency of faith. I am asking you to look at the tiny, fragile wisp of vapor rising from the sea of your circumstances and boldly declare that the rain is coming. The air in the room is growing incredibly heavy now. The spiritual humidity is rising rapidly, coating everything in the rich, undeniable promise of restoration. The sterile, dead numbness that held you captive for so long has been completely eradicated, washed away by the thrilling electric current of holy anticipation coursing through your veins. You can feel the hairs on your arms standing on end. You can smell the rich, earthy scent of incoming rain, the unmistakable fragrance of dry, cracked soil, finally preparing to drink. The wind is beginning to pick up, swirling around you, rattling the windows of your spirit. It is actively blowing away the dead leaves of your past failures, clearing the ground, and preparing the way for the new life that is about to erupt from the soil. The sky of your circumstances, which has been locked in a rigid, brassy stare for years, is finally darkening with the beautiful heavy weight of my incoming glory. Keep your hands open. Do not move. Do not try to analyze the wind or calculate the trajectory of the storm. The atmosphere has definitively shifted, and the long, brutal season of your waiting has been swallowed up by the arrival of my presence. Lean into the deep, echoing rumble of the thunder rolling across the horizon. Turn your face upward. Feel it. Right there, landing gently against your cheek. Cool and undeniable. The first drop. Right there, landing gently against your cheek. Cool and undeniable. The first drop. Then comes another, striking the back of your hand. Then a third, tapping lightly against your shoulder. You reach up your fingers, trembling, as they brush the moisture from your skin. You stare at the wetness on your fingertips, your mind struggling to process the staggering reality of what this means. The relentless, punishing drought that has defined your existence for so long is officially over. The sky, which for years offered nothing but a blinding, mockingly empty expanse of brass, is now bruised with the heavy, majestic purple of an incoming storm. The rhythm of the drops begins to quicken, tapping against the dry earth, turning the pale dust into rich, fragrant mud. As the rain begins to fall with increasing deliberate intensity, washing away the ash and the grime of your long wilderness, I need to teach you about the precise nature of what you are experiencing. I need you to understand the anatomy of a divine suddenly. For years, you have been held captive by the ruthless tyranny of human time. You have lived your life entirely bound by the rigid linear progression of days, weeks, and months. You have stared at the calendar hanging on your kitchen wall, feeling a profound, sickening panic every time you turn the page to a new month, realizing that nothing had changed. You have listened to the steady, merciless ticking of the clock in the dead of night, convinced that with every passing second, you were falling further and further behind. You looked at the sheer magnitude of the years you spent waiting, suffering and struggling, and you calculated the heavy toll it took on your life. Your human logic looked at the deep, cavernous crater your circumstances had dug, and concluded that the climb out would take exactly as long as the fall. You assumed that because it took a decade for the financial ruin to become entrenched, it would take a decade of grueling, agonizing labor to claw your way back to stability. You believed that because your chronic health battle had waged war on your body for so many exhausting seasons, any potential healing would have to be a slow, microscopic progression of minute improvements. But my child, I do not operate within the suffocating confines of your earthly clocks. I am not restricted by the sequential limitations of your calendar. I govern the universe from the realm of divine time, where 1,000 years are like a single day, and a single day can hold the weight of 1,000 years. When I step into your circumstances, I do not simply walk alongside you in your timeline. I actively compress time. I fold the years of delay, the decades of loss, and the accumulated months of deep discouragement into a fraction of a millisecond. The miracle that is currently washing over you does not require a long, arduous process of recovery. It does not demand a carefully phased rollout, a strategic recovery plan, or a slow rebuilding of the foundation. It only requires my spoken command. What the enemy spent years destroying, I am fully capable of restoring in the time it takes you to draw a single breath. I know the deep burning impatience that has plagued your spirit. You have paced the floorboards of your life, crying out to me, begging for a process to begin, pleading for just a tiny step forward. You wanted me to show you a logical staircase out of the pit. You wanted a roadmap, a blueprint, a recognizable sequence of events that your exhausted mind could easily track and understand. But I deliberately withheld the staircase because I was never planning to make you climb. I was planning to reach down and lift you entirely out of the darkness in one swift, violent motion of grace. I am completely eradicating the systemic entrenched problems that you believed would be a permanent fixture in your story. That massive looming financial mountain that kept you awake in a cold sweat is not going to be chipped away, stone by stone. It is going to be leveled into a plain in an instant. That heavy chronic physical or emotional affliction that you have slowly learned to accommodate, adjusting your entire life around its persistent pain, is being uprooted and thrown into the sea. I am flipping the script on your situation with such breathtaking speed that it will leave you entirely speechless. I want you to think of my disciples in the days following my ascension. I had given them a profound, earth-shattering promise. I told them to wait in Jerusalem for the promise of the Father for the arrival of the Holy Spirit, who would clothe them with unprecedented power. But I did not give them a date. I did not give them a timeline. I simply told them to wait. They gathered together in the upper room, a small, fragile group of men and women who were acutely aware of their own vulnerability. Outside those walls, the authorities who had crucified me were still in power. The political climate was hostile. The religious leaders were suspicious, and the threat of severe persecution was a very real, very heavy shadow pressing against their door. Inside the room, the hours bled into days. You can imagine the heavy, stifling texture of their impatience. They sat in the heat, watching the sun rise and set, battling the creeping whispers of doubt. They wondered if they had misunderstood the instructions. They wondered if they had missed the moment entirely. Human nature despises the void of waiting, and their minds surely raced with practical solutions, desperate to manufacture a way forward. But they stayed. They endured the agonizing friction of uncertainty. And then, when the day of Pentecost had fully come, the atmosphere did not shift gradually. The sky did not slowly darken over the course of an afternoon. The temperature in the room did not drop by comfortable, predictable degrees. The scripture says that suddenly there came a sound from heaven, as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. It bypassed all meteorological logic. It bypassed all human progression. In a fraction of a second, the stagnant, fearful air of that upper room was violently displaced by the roaring, undeniable power of heaven. The long, silent days of agonizing waiting were instantly terminated by a blazing, consuming fire that completely transformed their reality. They went from hiding in the shadows to stepping boldly into the streets, their voices echoing with a supernatural authority that permanently altered the course of human history. The wait was long, but the deliverance was instantaneous. This is the exact anatomy of the divine suddenly that is taking place in your life right now. The rain is falling heavier, soaking your clothes, washing away the dust of your despair. The impatience that has gnawed at your spirit, the bitter frustration of feeling endlessly stuck in neutral, is rapidly giving way to a profound, awestruck understanding. You are beginning to realize that the long delay was never a denial. It was the intense, necessary compression of the spring before the magnificent release. You are seeing that my silence was not absence, but the gathering of a mighty rushing wind. You do not have to figure out how to maneuver the complex logistics of this turnaround. You do not have to orchestrate the right conversations, manipulate the timing, or exhaust yourself trying to connect the impossible dots. I am doing it all. A single phone call will change the entire trajectory of your career. A single realization will completely shatter the relational wall that stood for a decade. A single shift in favor will open doors that have been padlocked and bolted shut since before you were born. Feel the cool, heavy rain pouring over you. Lift your face to the sky and let the water mix with your tears. Not tears of exhaustion this time, but tears of overwhelming, glorious relief. The impossible is becoming your daily reality. The breakthrough you thought you would never live to see is currently flooding the ground beneath your feet. But you must listen to me carefully. My child, When a vessel breaks the sound barrier, the sudden violent acceleration creates a massive sonic boom. It generates intense friction in the atmosphere. The sudden breathtaking speed at which I am currently moving your life forward will not go unnoticed by the darkness. The enemy of your soul, who was perfectly content to watch you languish quietly in the dry, dusty desert of your despair, is fiercely enraged by the sound of this rushing mighty wind. The sheer velocity of your sudden deliverance is going to attract immediate loud and intimidating opposition designed specifically to make you doubt the reality of this downpour. Keep your empty hands open, my child, and pay very close attention to the air in the room. You are about to learn how to recognize the subtle holy vibrations, the undeniable physical proof that the very atmosphere of your life is actively shifting as heaven forcefully intersects with your earth. For the longest time, you have lived in a state of profound emotional numbness. The prolonged season of disappointment you just survived acted like a heavy, suffocating anesthetic, dulling your senses and freezing your capacity to hope. You learned to expect nothing because expecting nothing felt like the only reliable way to protect yourself from the agonizing sting of yet another letdown. Your days became a mechanical routine of waking, surviving, and sleeping entirely devoid of color or expectation. The spiritual climate around you felt like a stagnant, windowless room where the air was entirely dead and unmoving. But I want you to sit very still in this exact moment and feel the subtle change. There is a distinct, sudden drop in the spiritual barometric pressure. The dead air is stirring. A faint, almost imperceptible current is brushing against your spirit, carrying with it a strange, unfamiliar energy. It is the quiet, electric hum of my glory, beginning to touch the very edges of your current reality. Massive, unprecedented breakthroughs do not materialize out of a void. They always cast a long, majestic shadow before they arrive. Long before your natural eyes can perceive the structural changes in your finances, your career, or your fractured relationships, the spiritual environment must be dramatically altered. This is the sacred space where true faith breathes and operates. Faith is not a blind, desperate wish. It is the concrete, undeniable evidence of things not yet seen. It is the deeply cultivated ability to stand under a perfectly clear, mercilessly blue sky and inhale the distinct, heavy scent of rain. Right now, the invisible realm surrounding you is pregnant with divine activity. The thick, heavy veil separating my heavenly providence from your earthly circumstances is growing exceptionally thin, practically translucent. The deep numbness that has shielded your heart for years is rapidly dissolving, and in its place, a sharp, thrilling anticipation is waking up within your chest. I want to take you back to a desolate peak in Israel, to a time when the earth was violently parched by 3.5 years of absolute drought. The ground was baked into a hard, unforgiving crust, splitting open in deep, jagged cracks that looked like desperate mouths, gasping for moisture. The streams had turned to dust, the crops had withered to ash, and the entire nation was suffocating under the heavy, oppressive silence of a brass sky. In the midst of this devastating dryness, my prophet Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bowed low to the earth, and told his servant to go look toward the sea. The servant climbed to the vantage point, stared out at the vast, empty horizon, and saw absolutely nothing. The sky was aggressively clear. The air was brutally dry. He returned to Elijah with the heavy, discouraging report of emptiness. 6 times the servant was told to return to the ridge. 6 times he walked the same path, squinting into the blinding sun, desperate for any indication that the agonizing drought was breaking. 6 times he faced the crushing familiar disappointment of a sky that refused to yield. I know you understand the profound exhaustion of that servant's walk. I know how many times you have looked out at the horizon of your own life, desperately searching for a tiny glimpse of rescue, only to be met with the agonizing, unchanging landscape of your struggles. You have checked your bank accounts, looked into the eyes of your loved ones, and evaluated your career prospects, returning to your knees, time and time again, with the same heartbreaking report. There is nothing there. The dryness seems permanent. The isolation feels entirely absolute. You have been tempted so many times to simply stop climbing the ridge, convinced that looking for rescue only deepens the pain of your reality. But I am the God of the seventh glance. When Elijah's servant walked up to that ridge for the seventh time, something in the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. He looked out over the vast expanse of the Mediterranean Sea, and there, rising quietly from the horizon, was a cloud as small as a man's hand. It was not a sprawling, ominous storm front. It was not a terrifying display of thunder and lightning. It was just a tiny, fragile wisp of vapor, easily missed by the untrained eye, completely insignificant against the sprawling backdrop of the massive empty sky. Yet that miniature cloud was all the proof heaven required. It was the absolute, undeniable shadow of the incoming flood. Elijah did not wait for the sky to turn black before he declared that the drought was over. He heard the roar of a heavy shower in the silence of that single tiny cloud. My beloved, you have been navigating a brutal, exhausting spiritual drought. There have been long, agonizing months where praying felt like throwing words against a concrete ceiling, where your faith felt brittle and dry, and where deep discouragement became your constant, unwanted companion. But I'm telling you to look out at the horizon of your life right now. I am already placing clouds as small as a man's hand directly into your daily routine. You must open your spiritual eyes and recognize them for what they truly are. They are not coincidences. They are the undeniable precursors to your flood. Notice the sudden, entirely unexplainable wave of deep peace that washed over you yesterday while you were doing something as mundane as washing the dishes or driving to work. You were bracing for the familiar spike of anxiety, but instead, your mind was enveloped in a quiet, profound stillness that you did not manufacture. That was a cloud as small as a man's hand. Pay attention to that random, completely unexpected word of encouragement from a stranger, or that tiny, seemingly insignificant financial blessing that arrived in the mail just when you were overwhelmed by fear. Notice the brief, fleeting moment of genuine connection with that difficult family member, a conversation that for the first time in years did not end in conflict, but concluded with a strange, gentle neutrality. Think about the moment you woke up this morning, and before the heavy weight of your responsibilities could pin you to the mattress, you felt a sudden, spontaneous spark of hope. These are not random, disconnected moments of luck in an otherwise dark universe. They are the subtle, holy vibrations of my kingdom colliding with your current reality. They are the precise tactical shifts in your environment that prove the long season of barrenness is officially breaking. Do not despise the day of small beginnings. Do not look at that momentary peace or that tiny financial reprieve and dismiss it because it does not instantly solve the entirety of your massive problems. The human mind demands to see the full raging hurricane before it will believe that the drought is over. But I am asking you to operate in a much higher, much more powerful frequency of faith. I am asking you to look at the tiny, fragile wisp of vapor rising from the sea of your circumstances and boldly declare that the rain is coming. The air in the room is growing incredibly heavy now. The spiritual humidity is rising rapidly, coating everything in the rich, undeniable promise of restoration. The sterile, dead numbness that held you captive for so long has been completely eradicated, washed away by the thrilling electric current of holy anticipation coursing through your veins. You can feel the hairs on your arms standing on end. You can smell the rich, earthy scent of incoming rain, the unmistakable fragrance of dry, cracked soil finally preparing to drink. The wind is beginning to pick up, swirling around you, rattling the windows of your spirit. It is actively blowing away the dead leaves of your past failures, clearing the ground and preparing the way for the new life that is about to erupt from the soil. The sky of your circumstances, which has been locked in a rigid, brassy stare for years, is finally darkening with the beautiful heavy weight of my incoming glory. Keep your hands open. Do not move. Do not try to analyze the wind or calculate the trajectory of the storm. The atmosphere has definitively shifted, and the long, brutal season of your waiting has been swallowed up by the arrival of my presence. Lean into the deep, echoing rumble of the thunder rolling across the horizon. Turn your face upward. Feel it. Right there, landing gently against your cheek. Cool and undeniable. The first drop. Then comes another striking the back of your hand. Then a third, tapping lightly against your shoulder. You reach up your fingers trembling as they brush the moisture from your skin. You stare at the wetness on your fingertips, your mind struggling to process the staggering reality of what this means. The relentless, punishing drought that has defined your existence for so long is officially over. The sky, which for years offered nothing but a blinding, mockingly empty expanse of brass, is now bruised with the heavy, majestic purple of an incoming storm. The rhythm of the drops begins to quicken, tapping against the dry earth, turning the pale dust into rich, fragrant mud. As the rain begins to fall with increasing deliberate intensity, washing away the ash and the grime of your long wilderness, I need to teach you about the precise nature of what you are experiencing. I need you to understand the anatomy of a divine, suddenly. For years, you have been held captive by the ruthless tyranny of human time. You have lived your life entirely bound by the rigid linear progression of days, weeks, and months. You have stared at the calendar hanging on your kitchen wall, feeling a profound, sickening panic every time you turn the page to a new month, realizing that nothing had changed. You have listened to the steady, merciless ticking of the clock in the dead of night, convinced that with every passing second, you were falling further and further behind. You looked at the sheer magnitude of the years you spent waiting, suffering, and struggling, and you calculated the heavy toll it took on your life. Your human logic looked at the deep, cavernous crater your circumstances had dug, and concluded that the climb out would take exactly as long as the fall. You assumed that because it took a decade for the financial ruin to become entrenched, it would take a decade of grueling, agonizing labor to claw your way back to stability. You believed that because your chronic health battle had waged war on your body for so many exhausting seasons, any potential healing would have to be a slow, microscopic progression of minute improvements. But my child, I do not operate within the suffocating confines of your earthly clocks. I am not restricted by the sequential limitations of your calendar. I govern the universe from the realm of divine time, where 1,000 years are like a single day, and a single day can hold the weight of 1,000 years. When I step into your circumstances, I do not simply walk alongside you in your timeline. I actively compress time. I fold the years of delay, the decades of loss, and the accumulated months of deep discouragement into a fraction of a millisecond. The miracle that is currently washing over you does not require a long, arduous process of recovery. It does not demand a carefully phased rollout, a strategic recovery plan, or a slow rebuilding of the foundation. It only requires my spoken command. What the enemy spent years destroying, I am fully capable of restoring in the time it takes you to draw a single breath. I know the deep burning impatience that has plagued your spirit. You have paced the floorboards of your life, crying out to me, begging for a process to begin, pleading for just a tiny step forward. You wanted me to show you a logical staircase out of the pit. You wanted a roadmap, a blueprint, a recognizable sequence of events that your exhausted mind could easily track and understand. But I deliberately withheld the staircase because I was never planning to make you climb. I was planning to reach down and lift you entirely out of the darkness in one swift, violent motion of grace. I am completely eradicating the systemic entrenched problems that you believed would be a permanent fixture in your story. That massive looming financial mountain that kept you awake in a cold sweat is not going to be chipped away, stone by stone. It is going to be leveled into a plain in an instant. That heavy chronic physical or emotional affliction that you have slowly learned to accommodate, adjusting your entire life around its persistent pain, is being uprooted and thrown into the sea. I am flipping the script on your situation with such breathtaking speed that it will leave you entirely speechless. I want you to think of my disciples in the days following my ascension. I had given them a profound, earth-shattering promise. I told them to wait in Jerusalem for the promise of the Father, for the arrival of the Holy Spirit, who would clothe them with unprecedented power. But I did not give them a date. I did not give them a timeline. I simply told them to wait. They gathered together in the upper room, a small, fragile group of men and women who were acutely aware of their own vulnerability. Outside those walls, the authorities who had crucified me were still in power. The political climate was hostile. The religious leaders were suspicious, and the threat of severe persecution was a very real, very heavy shadow pressing against their door. Inside the room, the hours bled into days. You can imagine the heavy, stifling texture of their impatience. They sat in the heat watching the sun rise and set, battling the creeping whispers of doubt. They wondered if they had misunderstood the instructions. They wondered if they had missed the moment entirely. Human nature despises the void of waiting, and their minds surely raced with practical solutions, desperate to manufacture a way forward. But they stayed. They endured the agonizing friction of uncertainty. And then, when the day of Pentecost had fully come, the atmosphere did not shift gradually. The sky did not slowly darken over the course of an afternoon. The temperature in the room did not drop by comfortable, predictable degrees. The scripture says that suddenly there came a sound from heaven, as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. It bypassed all meteorological logic. It bypassed all human progression. In a fraction of a second, the stagnant, fearful air of that upper room was violently displaced by the roaring, undeniable power of heaven. The long, silent days of agonizing waiting were instantly terminated by a blazing, consuming fire that completely transformed their reality. They went from hiding in the shadows to stepping boldly into the streets, their voices echoing with a supernatural authority that permanently altered the course of human history. The wait was long, but the deliverance was instantaneous. This is the exact anatomy of the divine, suddenly, that is taking place in your life right now. The rain is falling heavier, soaking your clothes, washing away the dust of your despair. The impatience that has gnawed at your spirit, the bitter frustration of feeling endlessly stuck in neutral, is rapidly giving way to a profound, awestruck understanding. You are beginning to realize that the long delay was never a denial. It was the intense, necessary compression of the spring before the magnificent release. You are seeing that my silence was not absence, but the gathering of a mighty rushing wind. You do not have to figure out how to maneuver the complex logistics of this turnaround. You do not have to orchestrate the right conversations, manipulate the timing, or exhaust yourself trying to connect the impossible dots. I am doing it all. A single phone call will change the entire trajectory of your career. A single realization will completely shatter the relational wall that stood for a decade. A single shift in favor will open doors that have been padlocked and bolted shut since before you were born. Feel the cool, heavy rain pouring over you. Lift your face to the sky and let the water mix with your tears. Not tears of exhaustion this time, but tears of overwhelming, glorious relief. The impossible is becoming your daily reality. The breakthrough you thought you would never live to see is currently flooding the ground beneath your feet. But you must listen to me carefully. My child, when a vessel breaks the sound barrier, the sudden violent acceleration creates a massive sonic boom. It generates intense friction in the atmosphere. The sheer velocity of your sudden deliverance is going to attract immediate loud and intimidating opposition, designed specifically to make you doubt the reality of this downpour. Even now, as the cool water of my grace begins to soak into your skin, you can feel the sudden tightening in your chest. The moment the breakthrough finally materializes, a sharp, familiar panic tries to seize your throat. A sinister whisper hisses in the quiet spaces of your mind, insisting that this is far too good to be true. It tells you that the rain is just a cruel illusion, a temporary reprieve before an even more devastating drought returns to crush you. The enemy of your soul knows he can no longer stop the physical manifestation of your blessing, so he is launching a desperate, aggressive psychological assault to steal your ability to receive it. He wants you to brace for impact, to shrink back in fear, and to sabotage the miracle before it can fully take root. This warfare is not fought with physical weapons. It is a violent battle for the territory of your mind. You are hearing the heavy, toxic echoes of your past rising up to challenge your newly arriving joy. The enemy is cruel, my child, and he will use the exact voices that have wounded you the most. He replays the cutting words of family members who sat across from you at dinner tables and casually minimized your worth. He reminds you of the toxic environments where you were treated as an outcast, told you were socially unfit, or labeled a disappointment simply because you did not conform to their rigid, selfish expectations. He brings up the ghosts of those who actively betrayed your trust, those who stood by and watched you fall without offering a single hand to help. The enemy takes all of those deeply ingrained childhood criticisms, all of that accumulated rejection, and he weaves it into a paralyzing narrative of imposter syndrome. The whisper grows louder, telling you that you are not qualified for this new season. It insists that you are an absolute fraud, that you do not belong in this elevated space, and that it is only a matter of time before everyone discovers how truly inadequate you are. He weaponizes your fear of the future, trying to convince you that if you accept this massive blessing, you will inevitably lose it, fail at it, or be destroyed by it. I see how these lies make your hands tremble. I see how the heavy weight of that cynicism makes you want to retreat into the familiar, predictable safety of your numbness. But I am commanding you right now, with the fierce, protective love of a father defending his own. You must not entertain these lies for a single second. You must actively, aggressively take every thought captive and drag it into the blazing light of my truth. I want you to think of my servant Nehemiah. I had given him a massive, unprecedented task to rebuild the ruined walls of Jerusalem. The city had lain in humiliating devastation for decades. Its gates had been reduced to charred rubble, and its defenses were completely non-existent. But when I placed the burden on Nehemiah's heart, I accelerated the timeline. The people began to rebuild the wall with breathtaking, supernatural speed. The gaps were closing, the stones were being hoisted into place, and the impossible was suddenly becoming their daily reality. But the moment the restoration became undeniable, the opposition arrived. Two men, Sanballat and Tobiah, stood at the base of the wall and launched a relentless campaign of psychological warfare. They could not physically stop the stones from being laid, so they attacked Nehemiah's mind. They mocked the builders, sneering at their efforts. Tobiah pointed to the massive heavy stones they were lifting and laughed, declaring that if even a tiny, lightweight fox climbed up on their newly built wall, the entire structure would crumble into dust. They threatened, they intimidated, and they sent letters filled with vicious rumors, attempting to paralyze Nehemiah with the exact same imposter syndrome that is currently assaulting you. They wanted him to doubt his calling. They wanted him to feel foolish, unqualified, and utterly terrified of the future. Nehemiah was faced with a critical choice. He could have dropped his trowel, climbed down from the wall, and engaged in a bitter defensive argument with his critics. He could have allowed their toxic opinions to dictate his emotional state. He could have stopped the miracle to defend his reputation. But Nehemiah understood the anatomy of spiritual warfare. He recognized that their loud, intimidating mockery was actually absolute proof that his work was succeeding. If the wall was truly as weak as a fox's footstep, they would not have been so enraged. The intensity of their attack validated the magnitude of his miracle. So Nehemiah looked down at his enemies, his hands still covered in the dust and mortar of his holy assignment, and he delivered a response that I want you to adopt as your permanent battle cry. He simply said, "I am doing a great work, so that I cannot come down." My beautiful child, you are doing a great work, and you cannot come down. You must absolutely refuse to descend into the muck and the mire of the enemy's cynicism. You must stop dropping your spiritual tools to argue with the ghosts of your past. When the voice of your history tries to tell you that you are a failure, you do not have to defend yourself. You simply raise the heavy iron shield of faith and let that flaming arrow extinguish itself against my promises. The shield of faith is not a passive accessory. It is a deliberate, active defense. It is the conscious, continuous decision to believe my word over the loud, demanding noise of your insecurities. Understand this profound truth. The enemy does not waste his arrows on empty targets. He does not expend this level of intense, concentrated psychological warfare on someone who is stuck, defeated, and permanently grounded. The sheer volume of the lies currently screaming in your head is the greatest external proof you have that the blessing manifesting in your life is entirely authentic. If the rain falling on your face right now were just an illusion, the darkness would not be fighting so violently to make you close your eyes. He is attacking your mind because he is absolutely terrified of what you are about to become once you fully realize that the drought is over. I am calling you to develop unshakable mental fortitude. This is the moment you must draw a hard, impenetrable boundary around your spirit. You must evict the toxic opinions of those who never had the capacity to see your true value. The relatives who favored others over you, the partners who betrayed your loyalty, the systems that unjustly cast you aside. They do not hold the pen that writes your future, and they do not have a seat at the table of your newly arriving joy. You must consciously strip them of their influence over your emotional atmosphere. When the paralyzing fear of the future tries to wrap its icy fingers around your neck, I want you to breathe deeply and focus on the warm, steady reality of my presence surrounding you. You're not an imposter. You're not a fraud waiting to be exposed. You are a meticulously crafted, deeply cherished vessel that I have personally selected for this exact outpouring of grace. Feel the profound shift happening within your chest right now. The sharp, icy grip of panic is slipping. The desperate need to sabotage your own happiness is dissolving under the heavy, constant rhythm of this miraculous rain. You are no longer cowering under the weight of those ancient criticisms. Instead, you are standing tall, your feet planted firmly in the muddy, life-giving soil of your new season. As you raise that shield of faith, you can actually feel the arrows of doubt bouncing off, completely powerless to penetrate your peace. You are realizing that you do not have to figure out how to maintain this miracle on your own strength. I am the author of it, and I am the sustainer of it. The transition from fear to absolute confidence is taking root in your spirit. You are breathing in the clean, washed air of your breakthrough, and as you exhale, you are releasing the last lingering traces of your anxiety. You are safe. You are held. You are fiercely protected. The loud, intimidating opposition that rushed in to steal your joy is suddenly beginning to falter. The enemy is realizing that you will not come down from the wall. You will not entertain the cynicism. You will not bow to the imposter syndrome. Listen closely as the atmosphere changes once more. The hissing whispers are growing faint. The loud, demanding voices of your critics are losing their volume retreating into the shadows where they belong. One by one, the toxic echoes of your past are being suffocated by the steady, overwhelming sound of the pouring rain. They are fading away, growing quieter and quieter until they are nothing but a distant, irrelevant memory. And now, there is only silence. A deep, magnificent reigning silence in your mind, broken only by the beautiful sound of heaven intersecting your earth. With the noise of the enemy completely muted and the frantic distractions of fear entirely washed away. The atmosphere is perfectly clear. Your mind is quiet. Your heart is fiercely guarded. Now that the external voices have been silenced, I need you to turn your gaze entirely inward. Before you take your first physical step into the reality of this massive blessing, there is a fundamental truth about who you really are that must be permanently anchored in your soul. You have spent a lifetime believing that your worth is a currency you must somehow earn. You have looked at your own reflection through a mirror that was cracked and stained by the hands of people who were entirely incapable of loving you properly, and you accepted their distorted image as your absolute truth. Because you were treated as an afterthought, you concluded that you were inherently forgettable. Because you were discarded when you failed to meet rigid, selfish expectations, you internalized the devastating lie that your value was completely tied to your performance. You have carried this deep, chronic insecurity like a heavy stone in the center of your chest, secretly convinced that you are fundamentally disqualified from experiencing a truly beautiful, abundant life. Even now, as the gentle, undeniable rain of my grace falls upon your skin, there is a quiet, trembling hesitation within you. You are looking at the staggering magnitude of the miracle I am unfolding, and a part of you is whispering that you simply do not deserve it. You are standing in the middle of this holy downpour, desperately tallying up a ledger of your past mistakes. Your mind is rapidly reviewing the years you feel you wasted, the relationships that fractured under the weight of your own unresolved pain, and the naive decisions that led to your deepest regrets. You are laying out your failures before me like a rap sheet, bracing yourself for a transaction. You have been conditioned by a broken world to believe that goodness must be purchased with perfection. And because you know your own imperfections so intimately, you assume you must pay for them with perpetual suffering. You think you must perform penance to afford this breakthrough. You believe you must somehow balance the cosmic scales by enduring just a little more hardship before you are allowed to breathe freely. My child, I need you to drop the ledger right now. Let it fall into the mud at your feet and watch the rain wash the ink completely away. The unprecedented 10-minute miracle arriving in your life is not a wage you have earned. It is a gift I am freely giving. It is the pure, unadulterated reality of unmerited favor. I do not operate a divine economy based on your flawless performance. If my blessings were distributed based on human perfection, the heavens would remain permanently sealed. You are not receiving this sudden massive breakthrough because you finally managed to get everything right, or because you finally suffered enough to pay off your spiritual debts. You are receiving this staggering outpouring of grace for one profound, unshakable reason. Because you are my beloved. I want to take you to a dusty, sun-baked road in the ancient world. See a young man walking slowly, his head bowed his feet, dragging through the dirt. He is covered in the foul, unmistakable stench of a foreign pig pen. He has squandered his entire inheritance on reckless, empty pursuits. He has traded his dignity for scraps, and he has completely ruined his own life through his own terrible choices. He is returning to his father's estate in absolute disgrace, and as he walks, his mind is frantically rehearsing a speech of unworthiness. He is practicing his apology over and over again, saying, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." He has determined his own value. He has calculated his failures and concluded that the very best he can hope for is a life of grueling servitude on the edges of the estate. He expects to be met with folded arms, a stern lecture, and a lifetime of proving he is sorry. But long before the boy even reaches the gate, while he is still a great way off, the father sees him. The father does not wait for the boy to clean himself up. He does not demand that the boy endure a probationary period to prove his repentance. The father gathers his robes and breaks into a desperate, undignified sprint down the dusty road, running with reckless abandon toward the smell of the pig pen. He throws his arms around the boy's filthy neck and kisses him. The son begins to recite his carefully rehearsed speech of disqualification. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father completely interrupts him. He does not even acknowledge the boy's declaration of unworthiness. He turns immediately to his servants and shouts, "Bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate." The father's unconditional love violently overrides the son's profound shame. He does not allow the boy to demote himself to a servant. He instantly radically restores him to his rightful place as an heir. The mud of the pig pen is covered by the heavy, luxurious fabric of the finest robe. The empty, trembling hands are weighed down by the heavy gold signet ring of family authority. The bare, calloused feet are shod with the sandals of sonship. The boy returned, expecting to beg for scraps, but the father interrupted his shame with a royal feast. "My beloved child, you are walking down that dusty road right now, trying to recite your own speech of disqualification to me. I hear the quiet, heartbroken whispers of your spirit. You are saying, 'I failed at that marriage, so I am no longer worthy of a beautiful, healthy relationship. Just let me survive.' You are saying, 'I messed up my finances. I trusted the wrong people, and I lost everything, so I am no longer worthy of abundance. Just let me scrape by and pay the bills.' You are saying, 'I allowed my family to abuse me. I stayed too long in toxic environments, and I am too damaged, too scarred, too broken to hold this massive new blessing. Make me like one of your hired servants. Let me just stay on the periphery of happiness.' You have spent years settling for the scraps of life, entirely convinced that the pig pen of your past has permanently disqualified you from the palace of your future. I am running down the road to meet you, and I am interrupting your speech. Stop punishing yourself for debts I have already paid in full. Stop demanding a sentence of lifelong suffering where I have already declared absolute freedom. I am not looking at the mud on your shoes, and I am not holding my breath waiting for you to prove you are finally good enough. My divine, relentless affection for you covers a multitude of sins, and it radically, violently restores everything that was lost, wasted, or stolen by the enemy. The profound goodness that is rushing into your life in these final minutes is not an accident, and it is certainly not a mistake. I am actively restoring your rightful place at my table, and you must finally give yourself permission to sit down and be served. It is time to unlearn the deep chronic habit of shame. It is time to stop flinching when something beautiful happens to you, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the universe to realize it gave the blessing to the wrong person. The imposter syndrome that tried to paralyze your mind earlier was rooted in the false belief that you are a spiritual orphan who somehow managed to sneak into the throne room. But you are not an intruder. You were chosen. You were adopted. You were deliberately, specifically grafted into a royal lineage. The spirit of adoption does not operate on a merit system. It operates entirely on the Father's irreversible choice. I chose you. I see the quiet, hidden beauty of your soul. I see the immense, breathtaking strength it took for you to simply keep breathing through the darkest seasons of your life. I see the pure, resilient heart that refused to turn entirely to stone, even when the world gave you every reason to become cold and bitter. Stand still in the pouring rain of this moment and feel the heavy, stifling rags of your insecurity falling away from your shoulders. They are sliding off your frame, dissolving into the wet earth. In their place, feel the tremendous comforting weight of the best robe being wrapped securely around you. It is the covering of my absolute unmerited favor. It smells of heaven of grace and of impossible restoration. It is completely hiding the scars of your past and wrapping you in the undeniable dignity of your true identity. You are royalty. You are a fiercely protected, lavishly loved heir to a kingdom that knows no end. Hold out your hands, my child, the hands that have worked so hard, the hands that have wiped away so many lonely tears, the hands that you believed were completely empty. Feel the sudden heavy weight of the signet ring being placed upon your finger. It is the ultimate symbol of my authority, my trust, and my covenant with you. It signifies that you carry my name, and that you have full, unrestricted access to the boundless resources of my grace. You are no longer a victim of your circumstances. You are no longer the forgotten, rejected outcast standing in the shadows of someone else's success. You are the focal point of my divine favor. You are worthy of profound goodness, not because of what you have done, but simply because of whose you are. Feel the deep foundational healing taking place within your core. The chronic, aching void of unworthiness is being entirely filled with a warm, solid, unshakable confidence. The fear of being found out, the dread of being deemed inadequate, is gone. You are looking at yourself through a new pristine mirror, and for the first time in your entire life, you are finally seeing the brilliant, radiant reflection of the royal child I created you to be. You belong here in the center of this miracle, with the heavy robe of grace upon your shoulders, the ring of authority upon your finger, and the undeniable truth of your worthiness permanently anchored in your soul. You are now completely equipped for what happens next. The internal transformation is finished. The ground of your heart is secure. Now, as the rain continues to fall and the atmosphere hums with electric anticipation, you must ready your physical and spiritual posture for the sheer magnitude of the blessing rushing toward you. Requires you to prepare your vessel to hold it. Look around you, my child. Look at the immediate physical space you inhabit. For years, the heavy, suffocating weight of your despair has not only dictated your internal landscape, but has slowly spilled over into your external reality. Your survival mode has left a trail of disarray. Papers stacked haphazardly on the kitchen counter, representing the overwhelming debts and decisions you could not bring yourself to face. Closets filled with the clutter of a stagnant season. A daily routine structured around simply making it to sunset without completely falling apart. You have been living in the cramped defensive posture of someone expecting the ceiling to cave in. But the ceiling is not collapsing. The sky is opening. The internal transformation of your royal identity is now complete, and the undeniable truth of your worthiness is locked firmly into your spirit. Now the physical reality of your life must be aggressively pulled into alignment with what heaven is doing. You must make room. You cannot hold a torrential downpour in a thimble, and you cannot receive the sheer massive influx of my incoming provision if your life is too cluttered with the debris of the drought to hold it. I am calling you out of the passive, curled-up posture of waiting and commanding you to step into the dynamic, powerful stance of active expectancy. Faith is not simply a feeling of warmth in your chest. It is the physical movement of your hands preparing for a reality that has not yet materialized in the natural world. It is the conscious, deliberate decision to expand your capacity. Right now, I am pouring out a blessing so expansive, so comprehensive, that it will require space you do not currently have. If you do not actively stretch your expectations and organize your life to receive it, the blessing will overflow and run down the sides of your limited capacity. I want to give you exceedingly abundantly above all that you ask or think. But my provision will only expand to the exact perimeter of the borders you have prepared in faith. You must build the infrastructure for your miracle before the miracle arrives. Consider the widow of one of my prophets, a woman who found herself in the most desperate, terrifying disarray imaginable. Her husband was dead. Her creditors were pounding on her door, and they were threatening to take her 2 sons into slavery to pay off her mounting debts. She had nothing left in her house but a single insignificant jar of oil. Her reality was entirely bankrupt. When she cried out to Elisha for rescue, he did not immediately hand her bags of silver or summon an army to drive away her creditors. Instead, he gave her a strange, highly demanding instruction of active expectancy. He told her to go out to all her neighbors and borrow empty vessels. And he gave her a very specific warning: do not gather just a few. He was testing her capacity. He was challenging her to determine the exact size of her own miracle. Can you picture her moving through the dusty streets of her village? Her heart was breaking. Her sons were in peril. Yet she was knocking on door after door asking for empty pots, jars, and bowls. Her neighbors must have looked at her with pity and confusion. She was acting entirely out of alignment with her current poverty, and entirely in alignment with her impending deliverance. She was dragging heavy hollow clay vessels into her small, barren home, clearing the floor space, arranging them in neat waiting rows. She was sweating, exhausting herself to make room for a supply she could not yet see. When the door was finally shut, she took her one tiny, pathetic jar of oil and began to pour. The oil flowed. It filled the first borrowed vessel, then the second, then the third. It continued to pour, defying all human logic, defying the laws of physics, multiplying endlessly as she moved down the row. But pay very close attention to what happened at the end of the story. She called out to her son to bring her another vessel, and he replied that there was not another vessel. In that exact fraction of a second, the oil stopped. The miraculous supply did not run dry. My child, the prepared space simply ran out. The oil flowed to the absolute precise limit of the empty vessel she had gathered in faith, and not one drop further. This is the profound spiritual law of capacity, and it is the exact instruction I am whispering into your spirit right now. You must start gathering your empty jars. You must deliberately organize your life, your mind, and your daily routine to hold the vastness of what I am bringing. I want you to walk over to that stack of unopened envelopes and chaotic paperwork on your counter. Do not look at it through the lens of fear or poverty anymore. Look at it through the lens of a sovereign heir preparing to manage wealth. Organize your finances. Create a clean ledger. Map out the debts, the obligations, the numbers that have kept you awake, shivering in a cold sweat at 3 a.m. Put them in order, not to despair over them, but to set up the clean, structured framework where my supernatural provision will land. You cannot responsibly steward the massive financial breakthrough I am sending if your current resources are scattered in the dark. Clean out the spare room that has become a dumping ground for forgotten items. Vacuum the floors, open the blinds, and let the light hit the dust motes dancing in the air. Make the physical space pristine and welcoming, because the new business, the new relationship, or the new creative calling needs a clean, dedicated environment to take root. Update your resume, even if you do not yet know the name of the company that is about to desperately search for your exact skill set. Dust off the dreams you boxed up in the attic of your mind. Wash your car. Make your bed. Sit down at your table and set the second place setting, even if you are eating alone tonight, as a quiet physical prophecy that the profound isolation of your life is ending. This active preparation also extends to the subtle quiet spaces of your relationships. There is a specific lingering rift that you have allowed to remain fractured because you simply lack the emotional energy to address it. A text message left unreturned, an apology left unspoken, a misunderstanding allowed to harden into a wall of silence. I am gently pressing on your heart to mend it now. Reach out. clear the air. Send the message without demanding an immediate perfect response. You are not responsible for their reaction. You are only responsible for clearing the debris from your own courtyard. You must remove the friction of unforgiveness so that the heavy rushing wind of my blessing does not catch on the jagged edges of old resentments. You are sweeping the floor of your soul, ensuring there is nothing in the way to trip you up when the acceleration begins. I am asking you to adopt the mindset of total abundance right in the very center of your current poverty. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means understanding that your current reality is temporary and actively shifting. When you wake up tomorrow morning, I want you to swing your legs out of bed and plant your feet on the floor with the posture of someone whose prayers have already been answered. Brush your teeth, drink your coffee, and walk out of your front door, acting as if the miracle is simply waiting for you at the end of the driveway. Hold your chin up. Soften your shoulders. Walk with the steady, measured pace of royalty. Who knows the supply ships have already docked at the harbor? Feel the emotional disarray melting away as you move through these practical, faithful steps. The frantic, scrambling energy of survival is being replaced by the deep, focused calm of readiness. Your hands are no longer trembling with anxiety. They are moving with purpose, smoothing out the wrinkles in your life, opening the doors, and preparing the ground. You have stopped focusing on the punishing heat of the drought and have turned your entire attention to building the cisterns that will hold the rain. The atmosphere in your room is now thick, dense, and vibrating with an almost unbearable tension. The rain is drumming a steady, heavy beat against the roof, washing the world clean outside your window. You have done the work. You have faced the external voices and silenced them with the iron shield of faith. You have looked inward, allowing my unconditional love to strip away the rags of your shame and clothe you in the robes of unmerited favor. And now, you have looked outward. You have organized the chaos. You have swept the floors. You have gathered your empty vessels and arranged them neatly in a row. Look around your life right now. The clutter is gone. The ledgers are open. The heart is mended. The room is perfectly, beautifully quiet, save for the sound of the rain and the slow, steady beating of your own heart. You are standing perfectly still in the absolute center of your life, surrounded by open, empty jars, waiting with a breathtaking, silent expectancy. The preparation is complete. There is nothing left to do but breathe. The infinite, eternal timeline of heaven and the precise, ticking timeline of your earthly existence are rushing toward each other at blinding speed, locking together in this exact, holy fraction of a second. You can feel the sheer kinetic force of this collision pressing against your chest. As the veil between what is and what is about to be tears completely open, the atmospheric pressure in your life reaches its absolute peak. It is heavy, dense, and suffocatingly tight, making it difficult to draw a full breath. Your hands, which just moments ago were steadily organizing your vessels, are now gripping the edges of the table. Your pulse is hammering a frantic, erratic rhythm against your throat. Suddenly, the deep, focused calm of your preparation is being hijacked by a sharp, violent spike of anxiety. Every nerve ending in your body is screaming at you to run, to flinch, to look away, to brace for a catastrophic impact. I know this feeling intimately. My child, I know the terrifying, dizzying vertigo that strikes when you are standing on the very precipice of a miracle. The human mind is deeply conditioned to survive, not to soar. It recognizes this intense building pressure and automatically interprets it as impending doom. You have stood at similar thresholds before, waiting for the heavy click of the doctor's door to open, with the final pathology report, watching the typing bubble appear and disappear on a text message that will determine the fate of a fractured family relationship, or staring at the blank screen of an inbox, waiting for the financial settlement that will either save you or sink you. In those moments, the pressure always felt like a warning that everything was about to shatter. You have learned to associate this level of intense, suffocating tension with devastation. But I am asking you to look at me right now, to lock your eyes onto mine, and to override every frantic, terrified impulse in your body. Do not flinch. Do not look away. Do not abandon the empty vessels you have so faithfully gathered. The pressure you are feeling is not the crushing weight of a collapsing ceiling. It is the structural integrity of your obstacle finally giving way. I need you to transition your spirit from the frantic noise of anxiety into a state of absolute unwavering focus. This is the final threshold. Everything you have endured, every tear you have shed in the dark, every quiet act of obedience you performed when you felt entirely abandoned has culminated right here in this singular explosive moment of convergence. I am synchronizing your earthly patience with my heavenly power, and this divine intersection requires your total concentration. I want you to envision Joshua and the Israelites standing before the massive, impenetrable walls of Jericho. Those walls were legendary, towering above the desert floor, thick enough to hold chariot races across their tops, and heavily fortified by an enemy terrified of the approaching Israelites. The gates were barred shut. No one went out, and no one came in. To the human eye, it was an absolutely impossible obstacle, a permanent blockade, standing between my people and the promises I had sworn to give them. But I did not give Joshua a strategy of brute force. I did not tell him to build siege ramps or battering rams. I gave him a strategy of radical synchronized obedience. I told them to march. For 6 days, they walked around the perimeter of that massive fortress in total agonizing silence. The only sounds were the crunch of sandals on the dry earth, the creak of leather armor, and the occasional blast of the ram's horn. Can you imagine the intense psychological pressure of that silence? They walked beneath the towering shadows of their enemies, listening to the taunts and mockery echoing down from the parapets, forbidden to speak a single word in their own defense. Their human logic must have been screaming at them. The anxiety must have been suffocating. They were exposing their backs to an armed city looking completely foolish, walking in endless circles with absolutely nothing changing. Day after day, the walls stood firm. Day after day, their circumstances looked completely identical to the day before. The temptation to break rank, to shout back, or to simply abandon the march and run back into the wilderness must have been overwhelming. But they maintained their focus. They kept their mouths shut and their feet moving. They allowed their silent obedience to build the spiritual pressure required for the miracle. Then came the 7th day. The instructions shifted. The stakes were magnified. They were not to march around the city once, but 7 times. The physical exhaustion and the mental strain were pushed to their absolute limits. Lap after lap, the heat of the sun beat down upon their shoulders. The dust coated their throats. The tension in the atmosphere grew so thick it could be cut with a sword. As they rounded the final corner of the 7th lap, the synchronization of heaven and earth reached its apex. The long, grueling season of their silent obedience was about to violently collide with the raw, unfiltered power of my command. Joshua turned to the exhausted, dusty, desperately anxious people, and he gave the final order. The priests lifted the ram's horns to their lips and blew a long, piercing, continuous blast. Joshua raised his voice and commanded them to shout, for I had given them the city. And in that exact explosive moment, their earthly voices locked perfectly with my heavenly force. The impenetrable walls of Jericho did not crumble slowly. They did not chip away stone by stone. They violently, instantly collapsed flat into the earth. The massive blockade that had mocked them for 7 days was eradicated in a fraction of a second, clearing a direct, unimpeded path for them to step straight into their promised inheritance. My beautiful child, you are on the 7th lap of your 7th day. You have marched around the impossible walls of your circumstances in exhausted, agonizing silence for so long. You have walked the perimeter of your financial ruin, your chronic illness, and your broken family, keeping your faith intact even when you looked foolish, even when the enemy taunted you from the parapets of your despair. You have endured the grueling repetition of waking up every single day and choosing to believe me when your reality offered absolutely no visible proof that anything was ever going to change. Your silent, faithful marching is over. The long, dry season of walking in circles has reached its definitive end. The intense, suffocating pressure you are experiencing in your chest right now is the spiritual equivalent of that seventh lap. It is the friction of the invisible realm tearing open. I am asking you to stand your ground and focus. Look directly at the massive looming wall that has blocked your path for years. Look at the debt. Look at the diagnosis. Look at the loneliness. Do not let your eyes dart around the room in a panic. Fix your gaze on the obstacle with the calm, terrifying authority of a royal heir who knows exactly what is about to happen. I am bringing every fragmented piece of your story into perfect divine synchronization. The empty vessels you have so carefully prepared are sitting in perfect alignment. The soil of your heart has been washed clean by the rain of my unconditional love. The heavy protective robe of my grace is resting squarely on your shoulders. All of the silent, unseen preparation has been accomplished, and the massive, heavy gears of my divine timing have clicked firmly into place. There is no more delay. There is no more waiting for the next season. The fullness of time is not approaching. It is here standing in the center of your room, wrapping its hands around yours. You must quiet the trembling in your spirit. Focus your mind with laser precision. The anxiety that is trying to convince you to run is nothing but a frantic dying reflex of your old survival mode. Let it pass through you like a sudden gust of wind and let it go. You do not need to survive anymore. You are about to inherit. You are standing directly in the epicenter of the convergence, where the brutal pain of your past and the breathtaking glory of your future are meeting in this singular holy instant. The air has grown completely still. The heavy drumming rain outside has suddenly paused, leaving a thick, expectant silence hanging in the atmosphere. It is the profound, sacred hush that always immediately precedes the thunder. The ram's horn has been lifted to the lips of heaven. The long, piercing note is about to shatter the quiet. I want you to close your eyes, plant your feet firmly on the floor, and open your empty hands. Do not brace for devastation. Brace for glory. Draw the air deep into your lungs, filling your chest to its absolute capacity. Hold it there. Feel the stillness. Feel the perfect electric readiness of your spirit. We are standing together on the absolute edge of the precipice, holding a deep collective breath, waiting for the final shout. Exhale, my child. The silence shatters. The heavenly shout resonates not in your physical ears, but in the very center of your spirit. A shockwave of pure, unadulterated power ripping through the atmosphere of your life. The countdown has reached 0. The final agonizing grain of sand has fallen through the hourglass of your waiting. You have crossed the threshold, and the 10-minute window of your unprecedented miracle is no longer approaching. It is actively, violently manifesting right before your wide-open eyes. Feel the ground beneath you tremble as the immense, undeniable weight of my glory touches down into the physical reality of your existence. The walls that surrounded you are not merely cracking, they are disintegrating. The massive looming structures of impossibility that have cast a long, cold shadow over your days are vaporizing into dust. You are standing inside the miracle. Keep your eyes wide open. Do not blink. I want you to witness the absolute majesty of my deliverance. For years you have begged for a small crack in the door, just a sliver of light, to prove that I was still there, and that I still cared. I am not giving you a sliver of light. My beloved, I am tearing the roof off the building. The oppressive darkness that whispered you were forgotten is being utterly obliterated by a blinding, radiant dawn. This is the exact, breathtaking moment where human limitation violently collides with divine sovereignty. Look at the insurmountable odds that stack themselves so high against you. Look at the absolute lack of human options you faced just moments ago. Now watch them bow. Watch them yield. The forces that sought to crush your spirit and run your life into the ground are currently being dismantled by the very breath of my mouth. I want to take you to the edge of the roaring, chaotic waters of the Red Sea. Stand beside Moses in the biting, salty wind of the desert night. The Israelites are gathered on the shoreline, exhausted, terrified, and entirely trapped. Before them lies an impassable ocean, black and churning, representing certain death and absolute failure. Behind them, the thunder of chariot wheels and the furious war cries of Pharaoh's advancing army shake the earth. They are caught in the ultimate impossible snare. Panic ripples through the camp like a physical disease. They are weeping, crying out in sheer terror, turning on Moses, asking if there were not enough graves in Egypt, that he had to bring them out into this barren wasteland to die. Humanly speaking, the story is over. The trap is sprung. There is absolutely no way out, no logical escape route, no earthly strategy that can save them. But I did not bring them to the edge of the sea to let them drown, and I did not bring you this far into the wilderness to abandon you to your enemies. I spoke to Moses over the deafening roar of the panic, and my command was profoundly simple. Tell the people to move forward. Raise your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it. Can you see him stepping up to the foaming edge of the water? He does not have a fleet of ships. He does not have an army to fight off the Egyptian empire. He only has a piece of wood and the undeniable supreme authority of my word. He stretches out his hand, and in that exact second, the atmosphere radically shifts. A powerful driving east wind descends from the heavens, hitting the water with the force of a physical blow. The sea does not merely recede. It is violently ripped apart. The black churning waters pile up on the left and the right, forming towering, shimmering walls of liquid glass, held back by the invisible, muscular hand of my power. And there, revealed in the center of the impossible sea, is a wide, perfectly dry path. I made a highway through the deep. I fought for them, and they only had to stand still, and behold their salvation. My beautiful child, I am parting the sea for you right now. The raging waters of your impossibilities are rearing back, bowing to the absolute authority of my love for you. The sudden, spontaneous physical healing that defies every medical prognosis and leaves the doctors staring at your charts in absolute bewilderment. That is your sea parting. The sudden ringing of the phone, bringing an offer for a position. You were told you were completely unqualified for a role that changes your entire financial and professional trajectory in a single 5-minute conversation. That is your dry ground appearing. The email landing in your inbox, carrying the miraculous, inexplicable cancellation of a debt that has been suffocating you for a decade. That is the east wind blowing through your life. You are watching mountains move in real time. You are witnessing the precise, undeniable moment when a long-delayed, tear-soaked prayer is suddenly emphatically answered right in front of you. The sharp, Dizzying anxiety that had you gripping the edges of the table just a moment ago is evaporating entirely, replaced by a profound, staggering awe. You are standing in the center of your room, looking at the physical manifestation of the impossible. Your logical mind is scrambling, trying to catch up with what your spirit already knows to be true. You are reading the impossible words on the screen, listening to the miraculous voice on the other end of the line, feeling the sudden, inexplicable absence of chronic pain in your physical body, and your breath is catching in your throat. It is here. It is actually, finally here. You do not have to strive for it. You do not have to fight the army closing in behind you, and you do not have to attempt to swim across the treacherous waters ahead of you. I am fighting for you. I am holding back the waters. I am creating the path. Your only requirement in this explosive, holy moment is to stand absolutely still in the center of the downpour and allow the sheer, breathtaking magnitude of my goodness to wash over you. Watch as the final remnants of your obstacles are completely eradicated. The heavy iron gates that were slammed shut against your progress are being ripped off their hinges. The people who stood in your way, the systems that denied you the circumstances that continuously bound your hands and restricted your movement, they are losing their grip entirely. My favor is sweeping through your life like a rising tide, elevating you far above the snare of the fowler. You are no longer the victim of your environment. You are the focal point of a divine rescue operation. The enemies of your peace, the chronic stress, the biting loneliness, the deep-seated fears of abandonment and failure are being swallowed up by the waters closing behind you. I am separating you permanently from the season of your suffering. Let the reality of this divine intervention sink into the deepest, most exhausted fibers of your being. You have read the stories of my miracles in the ancient texts. You have heard the testimonies of others who have walked through the fire and come out entirely untouched. You have sat in quiet, darkened rooms and wept, asking if my arm was too short to reach down into the messy, complicated, painful reality of your specific life. You asked if I still parted waters. You asked if I still moved stones. Look around you, my child. The stone is rolled away. The grave clothes are falling off. The water is standing at attention on either side of you. You are no longer a spectator to the miraculous. You are the living, breathing recipient of it. The 10 minutes I promised you are unfolding in a brilliant cascading display of grace, precision, and overwhelming power. The long, agonizing night of your weeping is decisively over, and the blinding, glorious light of your morning has broken completely across the horizon. Your empty vessels are no longer empty. The oil is flowing, filling every available space you prepared in faithful expectancy. The capacity you stretched to create is being met with a supply that defies all earthly logic. Feel the solid, dry ground beneath your feet, where just moments ago there was only a chaotic, terrifying sea. The obstacle is completely removed. The path forward is utterly clear, illuminated by the undeniable radiant glow of my presence. I am holding my hand out to you, gesturing toward the open, unhindered road that leads directly out of your wilderness. It is time to lift your foot and take that first trembling step forward. As your foot meets the dry ground, let the profound shock of this absolute deliverance wash over you, pulling you entirely into the overwhelming, breathless joy of the reality you are now entering. As your foot presses firmly against the dry, solid ground, the sheer magnitude of the breakthrough shudders through your physical body. You have crossed the invisible boundary line. The staggering reality of the miracle is no longer a theological concept or a distant hope. It is actively unfolding in the very room where you are standing. The shock of it strikes you with the force of a sudden rushing wind. Your mind is scrambling, trying desperately to process the absolute impossibility of what your eyes are seeing and what your hands are holding. You are reading the confirmation. You are hearing the words of reconciliation. You are feeling the sudden, undeniable absence of the pain that has plagued you for years. The impossible has manifested, and the heavy, suffocating awe that gripped you a moment ago is rapidly dissolving into a bright, overwhelming, breathless joy. This is the divine collision of my grace with your earthly reality. For so long, you had completely surrendered this specific piece of your heart. You had looked at the shattered fragments of your life, the business that collapsed, the relationship that turned to ash, the dream that withered under the harsh conditions of your prolonged drought, and you had quietly, secretly pronounced it dead. I saw you attend the funeral of your own hope. I watched as you wrapped your deepest desires in the heavy grave clothes of resignation. I was there when you rolled the massive, immovable stone of finality over the entrance to that dream, whispering through your tears that it was simply too late. You convinced yourself that some things are too broken to be repaired, that some bridges are too burned to be rebuilt, and that some failures are too profound to ever be reversed. You learned to live with the quiet, aching limp of a heart that had settled for less because you believed the best was permanently buried. But my beloved child, I do not merely repair what is broken. I do not simply put a bandage over a fatal wound. I am the God of the resurrection. I specialize in breathing vibrant, pulsing life into the very things the world has declared irreversibly dead. I do not just fix your problems. I completely overwrite the damage caused by the enemy, and I restore double what was lost during the painful, agonizing wait. The breakthrough you are stepping into right now is not a minor adjustment to your circumstances. It is a total miraculous resurrection of everything you thought was gone forever. I want to take you to a small, dusty village called Bethany, to a scene completely saturated with the heavy, suffocating weight of profound grief. Picture two sisters, Mary and Martha, completely undone by sorrow. Their brother Lazarus is dead. He has been in the tomb for 4 days. In the minds of everyone gathered there, the story has reached its tragic, unalterable conclusion. The professional mourners are wailing their cries, echoing against the stone walls of the houses. The reality of death has set in, and the stench of decay is a harsh physical reminder that human hope has an expiration date. When I finally arrive, the sisters run to me, their voices breaking with the same desperate, aching lament that you have cried out in the dark. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. They loved me, but their faith was entirely bound by the limits of human logic. They believed my power was restricted by time. They believed that once the stone was rolled across the tomb, even my grace could not penetrate the darkness. They thought I had arrived too late to be of any use. But I did not come to Bethany to prevent a sickness, my child. I came to demonstrate the absolute staggering supremacy of my resurrection power. I did not mourn as the world mourns, because I knew exactly what I was about to do. See me standing before that sealed tomb. The crowd is whispering in confusion. The sisters are weeping openly, their hearts shattered. I command them to roll away the stone. Martha, ever practical, ever bound by the terrifying reality of her circumstances, protests. She warns me of the decay, reminding me that it has been 4 days, that the situation is messy, offensive, and beyond repair. How many times have you spoken those exact words to me? How many times have you warned me not to touch a certain area of your life because it was too messy, too painful, too far gone to ever be redeemed? But I do not negotiate with death. I speak directly into the gaping, pitch-black mouth of the grave. With a voice that commands the very molecular structure of the universe, I cry out, "Lazarus, come forth!" And in that breathtaking, explosive fraction of a second, the impossible happens. The dead man hears my voice. The heart that had been still and cold for 4 days suddenly seizes with a violent, rhythmic pounding. The lungs that were empty draw in a massive, rushing breath of sweet air. The blood courses through his veins, flushing his skin with warmth and vitality. Out of the pitch-black darkness of the tomb, a figure emerges. He walks out into the blinding sunlight, still bound in his grave clothes, but entirely, miraculously, impossibly alive. Imagine the shock. Imagine the sudden deafening silence of the mourners as their wailing catches in their throats. Imagine the sheer mind-altering explosion of joy as Mary and Martha realize what they are seeing. The grief is violently interrupted. The despair is completely obliterated. The sisters who just moments ago were crushed under the weight of finality are now throwing their arms around the neck of a brother they thought they would never, ever hold again. The mourning is not just comforted. It is completely radically overwritten by a joy so profound it defies human language. My child, look closely at what you are holding in your hands right now. Look at the living, breathing reality of your own resurrected dream. The very thing you wept over, the situation you abandoned all hope for, the calling you thought you had permanently ruined. I have called it out of the grave. The heavy stone has been rolled away. I am unwrapping the grave clothes from your future right in front of your eyes. The relationships that were dead and decaying are suddenly breathing with new life and genuine reconciliation. The financial ruin that threatened to bury you has been entirely reversed, replaced by a sudden staggering abundance that leaves you speechless. The physical body that felt like a prison of pain is suddenly flooding with divine, miraculous healing. This is the exceedingly abundantly more that I promised you. I did not just bring you through the wilderness to let you survive. I brought you here to lavish you with a level of blessing that completely eradicates the memory of your suffering. The years that the locusts have eaten are being fully restored to you in this single magnificent convergence of grace and reality. You are experiencing the visceral, explosive shock of a sudden salvation. You are holding the absolute impossible. Feel the hot tears streaming down your cheeks, but notice how different they are from the tears you cried yesterday. Yesterday's tears were born of exhaustion, fear, and the agonizing ache of a delayed promise. Today's tears are born of pure, unadulterated awe. A sudden radiant laughter is bubbling up from the very depths of your spirit, spilling out of your mouth, as you look at the sheer magnitude of what I have done. You are laughing, the laugh of the redeemed, the joyous, incredulous laughter of a captive who has suddenly found the prison doors blown wide open. The heavy, suffocating spirit of heaviness has been completely replaced by the garment of praise. The shock is giving way to a celebration that cannot be contained. Your heart feels so full, so incredibly expansive, that you feel as though it might burst. You are looking at the massive towering walls of your former prison, lying flat in the dust, and you are looking at the vast open horizon of a future that is brighter and more beautiful than anything your human mind could have ever constructed. The morning has come. The brilliant golden sunlight is breaking across your face, warming your skin, and driving away every lingering shadow of the long, brutal night. You are dropping to your knees, not in defeat, but in the overwhelming, crushing weight of absolute gratitude. Your hands are raised, your face is lifted to the heavens, and your spirit is pouring out a song of thanksgiving that words cannot possibly capture. You are weeping tears of sheer, profound joy, completely undone by the realization of how fiercely, relentlessly, and lavishly you are loved. You are holding the miracle. You have crossed the sea. You have watched the dead come back to life. And now, as the tears of gratitude wash over you, your spirit is anchoring itself to this new miraculous reality. Let those tears fall, my child. Let them water the soil of this new ground you are kneeling upon. You have wept so many tears of exhaustion and heartbreak in the past, but these are entirely different. These are the tears of arrival. As you lift your face to the light, feel the frantic beating rhythm of your heart begin to slow into a deep, steady cadence. The adrenaline that has kept you running, fighting, and surviving for so many agonizing years is finally draining from your body, leaving behind a profound, settling calm. You do not have to fight anymore. The battle is won, and the spoils are already resting securely in your open hands. I want you to lower your arms. Take a slow, full breath, and feel the solid reality of this moment. The miracle is not a fleeting illusion. It will not vanish when you blink or fade when the sun goes down. It is here, it is real, and it is permanently yours. Think of the generation that stood on the banks of the Jordan River. For 40 years they had known nothing but the harsh, unforgiving reality of the wilderness. They had lived in temporary tents, constantly packing up and moving their entire existence, defined by scarcity wandering and the exhausting struggle to simply survive the elements. They had eaten manna every single day, relying on temporary provisions that could not be stored or saved. Their minds were entirely wired for poverty and transience. But then, I parted the waters of the Jordan, and they walked across on dry ground. Can you see them stepping out of the riverbed onto the lush green grass of the Promised Land? For the very first time in their lives, they were not looking at barren sand. They were looking at olive groves, vineyards, and fields of golden wheat. The air smelled of rain and rich soil, not dust and heat. They reached out and plucked the fruit of the land, tasting grapes and figs, realizing with a sudden staggering clarity that the decades of wandering were permanently forever finished. They did not have to pack their tents the next morning. They were finally home. You have just stepped out of the Jordan. My beloved, the soles of your feet are planted firmly on the rich, fertile soil of your own promised inheritance. The long, brutal wilderness season of your life is officially over. You do not have to wake up tomorrow morning wondering how you're going to survive the day. You do not have to hoard your emotional energy or brace yourself for the next inevitable crisis. The manna has ceased because you are now invited to sit at a banquet table that will never be cleared away. I am establishing a new baseline in your life, a foundation built not on the shifting sands of survival, but on the unshakable bedrock of my eternal covenant with you. This is your new normal. You are stepping into sustainable abundance, where the blessings I provide add absolutely no sorrow, no hidden catch, and no impending expiration date. I know the quiet, lingering whisper that still tries to speak in the back of your mind. I see the hesitation as you look at the breathtaking beauty unfolding around you. The trauma of your past has conditioned you to believe that if something is this good, it must be incredibly fragile. You are holding this breakthrough carefully, terrified that if you grip it too tightly, it will shatter. You are waiting for the other shoe to drop, wondering when the collector will come to demand payment for this sudden influx of grace. Hear me now, and let these words rewrite the very architecture of your mind. I am not a landlord who evicts his children. I do not give lavish gifts only to snatch them away when you stumble or make a mistake. The breakthrough you are holding is not a temporary reprieve. It is a permanent dwelling place. You can unpack your bags. You can hang your pictures on the walls. You can let down your guard entirely. The enemy cannot cross the river you just walked through, and the waters have closed permanently over your past. Walk through the physical spaces of your daily routine and feel this new, enduring peace settle over every detail. When you sit at your kitchen table to look at your finances, the old knot of terror in your stomach is completely gone. The ledger is clear, the debts are eradicated, and you are looking at a surplus that provides safety, not just for today, but for the years to come. You have moved from borrowing to building. When you walk into your workplace or step into the new calling I have placed before you, the imposter syndrome is completely silenced. You carry the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who knows they have been divinely appointed and perfectly equipped. When you look at the faces of your family, the fractured, strained tension has evaporated. In its place is a genuine restorative harmony, a peace that surpasses all human understanding, knitting your hearts together in a love that feels incredibly safe. Tonight, when you lay your head upon your pillow, you will experience something you have not felt in years. True unburdened rest. You will not lie awake, staring at the ceiling, your mind racing through endless scenarios of disaster, trying to solve problems that are too heavy for you to carry. You will close your eyes, and your breathing will be deep, even, and relaxed. You will sleep the sleep of the beloved, entirely enveloped in the secure knowledge that I am staying awake to watch over your life. I am guarding your mind. I am guarding your household, and I am actively sustaining the miracle I just provided. You do not have to maintain this blessing with your own exhausted strength. My endless grace is the engine that will keep it running. Your only job is to trust to receive and to rest in the shelter of my wings. The 10 minutes are complete. My child, the convergence has happened. The impossible shift in the atmosphere has solidified into the beautiful, tangible reality of your everyday life. Look at how far we have come together. You started this journey curled in the agonizing darkness of a drought, feeling forgotten, broken, and completely devoid of hope. You felt the sharp cutting winds of rejection and the heavy, suffocating silence of what felt like unanswered prayers. But I was with you in the dust. I was with you in the fire. I was holding you together when you thought you were completely falling apart. I guided you through the narrow, terrifying passageways of letting go of your control, of releasing your bitterness, of confronting your deepest fears, and of daring to hope again when hoping felt dangerous. Every tear, every moment of surrender, every quiet act of faith has been collected and woven into this breathtaking tapestry of redemption. You are now wrapped inside. You are completely transformed. You are no longer the frightened orphan begging for scraps outside the gates. You are the chosen, celebrated, lavishly loved heir, sitting at the head of the table, wearing the robe of favor and the ring of authority. The scars of your wilderness journey have not disappeared, but they no longer pulse with pain. They are now simply the beautiful golden marks of a warrior who survived the battle and inherited the kingdom. You are beautiful to me. I see the pure, resilient courage it took for you to simply keep breathing, and I am so profoundly proud of the person you have become. There is absolutely nothing that can separate you from my love. It is a fierce, relentless, eternal love that will never abandon you, never betray you, and never let you slip through my fingers. The morning sun is fully risen now, casting a warm, golden glow over the landscape of your new life. The storm has passed. The sky is a brilliant, unobstructed blue, and the air is fresh with the scent of new beginnings. Everything is ready. The path before you is clear, level, and lined with favor. Take a deep breath of this clean morning air. Feel the absolute peace anchoring your soul to the solid ground. Stand tall, my beautiful beloved child. Take my hand, let go of the past, and step boldly forward. Your miracle has begun.